All right. So let's talk about change strategies, change management for a little bit. So I've got 3 parts for you today. One is a little bit, what does change management in a digital age actually mean? How has it evolved? And then 2 case studies. One which is non-procurement, so a little bit outside of your area, and the other one is from a procurement department of how you can do a change strategy for a specific topic that you might have. So let's get started. We already heard a couple of times, I think yesterday and in the talk, in the panel just right before, I think if there's one constant, it's things are changing, whether we talk our business, but you also saw the last year political changes, economic changes, health changes, crises that we didn't really think about before. So the capability to change or to adapt to some of these changes is crucial for us as humans and more so for organizations. It's not a very new topic, but I think the last year has shown us very well how important it is to increase our skill in that regard, how important it is to lead the change and what that would mean for an organization. I brought to you a quote from one of our studies. So Capgemini has researched digital transformation for quite some time, 10 years. We celebrated our 10 years collaboration this year with the MIT, with whom we look at what makes digital transformation successful. So we're very much interested, what are the crucial success factors, what do digital masters do well, and how are they progressing over the last 10 years. I think 10 years ago, when we did the first study, there was still a bit uncertainty, what is that thing, digital transformation? And now we can see, I think organizations have understood how to transform digitally and what it really means. We differentiate in 2 dimensions, the what and the how. The what is really what you need to address in terms of customer experience, operational excellence, business model, but also in terms of your organization and talent. And then the how dimension is actually what we're going to talk about in the next 20-ish minutes. It's the leadership capabilities of how you manage that transformation. So how are we managing the change? As said, I think last year has accelerated the need for change and also challenged how we do change management. Because all of a sudden, a lot of the change managers were faced with, how do we do workshops virtually? How do we actually communicate fully virtually? How do we make events happen in a virtual context? So all these questions where you typically would meet in person, rely on seeing emotions, seeing reactions, and some of the needs employees would have, we had to do virtually and in a very different context. So that's a perfect segue on talking about how can we effectively do change management in a digital context. Before we do that, a few numbers, why it's worth investing into change management. A lot of the times we can see companies spend very much money, very big sums of money into technology, but they underestimate the investment into the people part. I think by a rule of thumb, there's different ones out there. What we saw, for every $1 you invest into technology, you need at least to invest 50 cents, half of it, into some of the people challenges that you're facing. Why is that worth it? You can see here at the bottom, 62% of organizations actually still struggle with the culture change they want to achieve through digital. There's more studies in how effective people have adopted new processes and automation, and whether actually the productivity gains have been realized. Because people don't understand, it has been really hard to do that. So it is really the #1 stumbling block is culture, people's skills, and their ability to adapt their behaviors to that new process, new organization. So what is change in a digital context? Typical change management programs would be fairly straightforward. You'd have a 2-3 year roadmap based on your plan. You would engage with the leaders, would then do a cascade, possibly do a bit of a change readiness assessment, mobilization, stakeholder initiatives, measure it, and then make sure it's handed over to a line function. So pretty linear, pretty clear direction for several months, years to come. Now, today, I don't think I need to tell you that this visibility, that clarity of the plan for the next 3 years is not there. If you're good, you can plan for 3 months, maybe 6 months, but basically you don't know many of the things. So we have to adapt the way we do change, because we have to be able to iterate our plan to adapt to changing environments, to changing needs of the organization or the employees. So there's less visibility, less clarity. It has to be agile. It has to be more nimble, more in step-by-step bits. That's kind of the context in which we are in. And what does that really mean? I already said a few things, right? So agile is the word here, but also I think what we can see over the last couple of years, design thinking, so the human at the heart of the change process, is becoming more and more important. Really understanding employees' needs for communication, for information, for learning has been crucial. So starting with design-led, human-centered approaches to do change, to understand the needs and to design your roadmap. And then one that I think is quite important, really empowerment, because it's not just about understanding a once in a period change initiative, but it's really around changing behaviors and therefore making sure that employees are empowered to do certain processes, certain steps that they do every day in a different way. So it's more empowerment, more engagement is needed to go from understanding to action. 2 more items that I want to highlight before we come to the principles and maybe give you a bit of a framework of how you can design your change program. Prototyping has been a big word, at least for the customer experience. You can also apply that to change management, and which is really important because it makes people understand quickly what the change is about, why they need to change, and in what direction it could be going. So tangible results in some way, in faster, smaller slices. You could say nudges, which has been a big word in change management as well. That's one other thing that's important. And the last piece I want to leave you with, blend it into daily work. So not outside of anything they do in their day-to-day routine, but how can you integrate some of the change elements on a more regular basis into the daily work? I think it was Lisa in the panel before who said the repetition is kind of crucial. That's how humans learn. That's just how our brain is wired. And to take that into account to make sure behavior change really happens is crucial when you design a change program in really our digital times. So I'm a consultant at heart, so a small framework for you to take away of how you can design change programs. A lot of the mechanisms that you might know, elements that you have learned in some of the courses, still relevant. But these 5 principles is something you can apply on how you design really your change approach. What are they? So shared vision. We heard about that, I assume, before. It's around really an exciting ambition and vision where to go to. I heard the speakers in the panel before talk about a sustainable roadmap for procurement. That could be exciting to the generations Z and so forth. That's a really important goal and ambition they want to be part of. So it has to be something attractive, almost like a brand promise or like an employer promise to what you want to do as an organization. Swarming. We talked about the linear approach of change management. Use the wisdom of the crowd. Really make sure bottom-up employees are involved. That creates engagement and also then more involvement and enthusiasm to actually participate in the change. Prototyping, I already mentioned, so really try to create tangible, visible results. Co-design. There's no better way in creating engagement with the employees, especially in times where change is constant. People tend to get tired. They tend to get frustrated with change. They want to rest. They want to celebrate. So co-designing, bringing them on board step by step and doing things together is important, is an important principle of how you design change interventions and certain formats. And lastly, empowerment. I mentioned that before. How do we really change habits and behavior? Because it's not just about having one project, but it's around increasing your capability of transforming and adjusting to change. And that is a more long-term skill that you're trying to apply to your organization and teach your organization than just running a program once and then it's done. You see here a number from Gallup. Engaged employees are way more productive and are way more willing to contribute to the change endeavors that you're trying to undertake. And we could show with this kind of approach that we actually doubled engagement into change processes, which is huge if you think about how much effort it usually takes to mobilize employees to really drive a large-scale change program through the organization. Now, let's jump into examples. So one thought before that is, a lot of the times I get asked, so do you have a toolbox? Do you have a framework, a pattern of how to do this? Yes, there are tools, quite a few out there, different methodologies. However, you're not going to get around designing your individual journey because your organizational culture, your team's culture is specific. So that is what you have to take into account and really make sure that you see what fits to your team and your organization best and design your own program. So there are some tools and helpers, but you're not going to get around on individualizing and really looking at what your organization is about. The first example I want to speak to you about is around a program we have run together with E.ON. E.ON is a large energy provider in Germany and has many decentralized regions. And the program was and is about customer centricity and the customer organization and how we really change that interface, not just in terms of behaviors, so how to increase customer satisfaction, but also how to apply new tools, technologies, applications, and bring that to the customer-facing workforce. And you can see here, this is a slide from the project team, what the ambitions were. And then how do we measure it? And I think this was quite crucial for the success of the program, that you have for each of the ambitions, you have a clear business outcome in what you want to measure. And then as a second step, not just did we have a business outcome to measure, but we linked the change management targets clearly and directly to that business outcome. And that's kind of the first thing I want to leave you with. When you design your program, you have a business outcome in mind, always. Whether this is sustainability, whether there's some productivity or efficiency gains that you're trying to leverage, whether that is customer satisfaction or supplier collaboration, whatever it is, you have a business outcome and you should link whatever you do in your change strategy to that business outcome. What do you need to do to really accelerate and leverage that? And then we had basically three streams, parts of the project for change management, which was around really looking at how do we market the project in the organization, so how do we create an experience. We talked about prototyping and also shared vision, so really branding that program in the organization and putting some effort into that was quite crucial. Then plan specific change management measures that we will speak about in a little bit, and also look at the program team, because usually these programs are large. They may be some central resources, but there also are many people sitting and contributing to the project in a more decentralized part of the country. And so how do you bring these together, establish a team feeling, and how do you make sure everybody is bought into the common ambition and what we're trying to achieve? Those are the key lessons learned. So I'm not going to go into this, but I thought it's interesting for you to have a look maybe when you design your own change program. One of the things that we learned, and I think we heard in the panel and yesterday, we heard a few elements already. So obviously, top-level commitment is key. Yes, you can involve employees bottom-up, so you have this synchronization of top management communication and employee involvement. Diversity in community. So this is the beauty of digital transformation, because some generations are more savvy in digital technologies than others. Leverage the differences in competencies and skills and the energy they have for these technologies. I'm going to show you how we did this in this program. And last but not least, really active involvement of the people you're trying to change. So this program is all about customer satisfaction. So talk to the customer, really try to understand what is it that is going wrong, where you need to really improve, because otherwise you take a lot of assumptions, and one of the rules of design thinking is don't assume, go and see. So diversity and community, what did we do? This is a nice format that we called Digithon. It's basically the idea of a hackathon. So how do you hack a certain problem, or how do you prototype technology? And we leveraged digital technology for that to do that. That's why Digithon. The basic principle here was not just to involve the project team or some of the stakeholders of the program, but also to create some energy with the younger with the younger workforce of E.ON. So there was the possibility there was a campaign and the possibility to actively apply to be part of this hackathon and to support the learning, or to build that learning application on how to drive customer satisfaction. So in the end, we had kind of a group participating in the workshop, which was around 1/3 project team, 1/3 some of the learners that were supposed to learn these new customer processes, and the other third was young recruits, trainees, dual students of E.ON, digital natives, so to say, on how you can build a learning application or a learning journey. So what this group did in 4 teams, they actually prototyped a learning solution, a learning platform of how to become more customer-centric and customer-facing. And so in 1.5 days, they actually come up with mock-ups of a wireframe, so they could take the outcomes of the workshop and start programming a first prototype of that e-learning app. And I think that's a great example of how to learn from some of the digital natives, how to bring them together in a format and make sure you have the best outcome for that organization. And in fact, so this Digithon actually created that e-learning app that is still used and maintained and improved to foster customer centricity, and it was then scaled and brought it into different regions in Germany. And I brought a quote to you from the CEO and chairman of the board, who had actually looked at the employee survey. And I think there's one important element in this quote, is they looked at the engagement level of the organization through this program, and 2/3 of the employees actually experienced that they feel more engaged and more engaged in this customer-oriented culture than they would have otherwise. So he clearly said this program was a success. The way we run the change was a crucial success factor in getting to that point. So that was one example of how you can do swarming, prototyping, empowerment, and at the same time really brand this program with a shared vision. The second example, real quick, is from the procurement area. So it's a change management strategy for an online capacity management tool with suppliers. I guess I'm not telling you anything new if you know that the relationship with the suppliers is going to change. Automation and technology and data is allowing you to communicate in real time and collaborate in real time, to use actually data and technology to predict scenarios more actively than doing that analog or manually, and to actually maybe also have some more transparency in the capacity planning as such. And so this was the ambition of the program for this automotive manufacturing company. And what we did with them is really work on the change management strategy and implementation on how to achieve that culture shift, because that platform is essentially changing of how you interact with your suppliers. It requires a lot of trust, openness to open the books in terms of your own planning and some of the issues, communicate in an effective manner. And so this was the change plan that they came up with, 3 phases: inform and understand, inspire, enable, and then embed at scale. They did a similar thing like in the previous example. So they also leveraged technology for the change management piece. They also looked at some of the success stories. They heavily communicated. They did invest quite a bit into the learning journeys, and that's a part that I want to deep dive with you in. You can see there's a lot of multiple measures. We talked about more nudging, more smaller day-to-day inserts of change management, so that you can effectively change your behavior, and this is what they did here. Because the procurement area has obviously not just their change programs in mind, but they have to manage the day-to-day business. How do you effectively design that strategy to fit it into their day and to make sure you have a high attendance and high participation? So this was what the plan was about. So learning strategy that I talked about that they did intensively. You can see here 3 layers, and I think this is a touching of latest science of how people learn best, or how a human brain will remember and learn in the best way. First of all, we looked at what are learning habits and preferences people have, because there's different ways of learning, whether you like to read a book or an article, watch a video, listen to a podcast, whatever it is, the way you learn is highly individual on your own preferences. And then to offer possibilities of how to engage in the program based on your own preferences. So you have an on-demand learning application. It was actually a 24 accessible learning app, like technology is. That's the benefit of it. And then you can choose of how you want to learn in order to understand really, okay, I know what it is, I know how to do it, and I practice. So the whole idea around 10% of listening and learning is what you remember, 20% is what you can grasp on how to do it, and then when you experience this and do it yourself is the biggest part of how you actually learn. That then passed with some social community learning. So we tried to bring the procurement and the supplier teams together in different events on platforms and make sure they exchange on issues they have and on some of the solutions so that they're faster by learning from each other. And also creating some engagement with each other to support the trust and the willingness to collaborate. And then last but not least, instructor-led trainings. So to add onto those 2 foundations with specific, efficient elements of presence event, presence trainings, whether that's a dialogue with different representatives of an organization, whether that is some kind of smaller workshops or awards or success story celebration. So that's another way of how you can do learning in the digital age. So really blended learning approach, smaller nuggets in a way that the human brain digests information. And that's precisely the takeaways from the teams and the suppliers. So those are quotes we gathered from the Change survey. So besides, we did establish some bigger monitoring, but also then looked in how effective are the change management measures linked to their day-to-day business. So the examples, the letters, the videos, they were directly linked to how they need to fulfill their tasks or what they need to do with their suppliers on that platform. It did fit into their busy days, so they were able to make time, whether that's like 10 minutes or half an hour in their day. They felt involved because they could design some of the use cases and some of the examples that were on the platform and how other people learn. And they really appreciated the different ways and different mechanisms of learning. So that's the second example, a bit shorter, but equally you can see we had a lot of swarming, so involvement into how we design the learning journeys on the basis of personas. We had a common vision to really improve and make the supplier collaboration more transparent and more effective. And we also looked into prototyping when designing that platform for learning and how to learn. So I want to leave you with these 3 recommendations. I think the theme for your strategy, for your change strategy, has to be to make it a first-hand experience of whatever culture change you're trying to drive. Take a culture-first approach. It's really about actual behavior change, and that you can only do if you put the person, the human, at the heart of it. Drive your strategy top-down and bottom-up. Leverage digital tools and data to really enhance the change experience. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Claudia. Loved your
I'll come
talk.
back to you.
Feeling so inspired right now to change everything. But what I took from it, start small, right?
Yes.
Beginning with small changes, integrate it in whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
and then
You need to have your ambition, your vision clear, but everything that then contributes can be small prototypes, small nudges on the way. And they will all feed into your bigger vision.
So that's the word of today, I think, nudges. We need nudges. So talking about nudges, we have some questions from you, dear viewers. Thank you so much for sharing your question with us today. So are you ready for the first question?
Yes.
It's a question from Professor Dr. Karsten Meckels. Thank you so much for sharing a question again. How would you integrate your ecosystem more into your change management programs?
I think the second example is a good example of how to involve the ecosystem. It is maybe not always easy with a technology or a security to do that, but there is good ways of how to do that. Teams is improving, some of the SharePoint options are improving to do that. I would always try to bring a bigger ecosystem in. When you have a program with technology, it is worthwhile. I think yesterday it was about small startups, to bring startups in, about great ideas, to bring other partners and suppliers into the conversation, and customers. So depending on what you're driving, it is crucial to listen to the customer.
Yeah, I really like that, bringing people in your organization to drive change.
And maybe to be a bit more concrete of how would you do that? I mean, in the beginning, when you plan your change program, when you look at your ambition, what is it you're trying to change, you can already bring in customers or partners at that point and really together define that ambition. That's always a better and more robust vision than if you design it somewhere in the back office or somewhere at the top. That it's a shared vision already, so it's there by design. And then when you design the change interventions, when you look at how you're going to run them, get feedback from the different ecosystem partners, customers, suppliers, and in the measurement as well. So don't just measure your own organization on what has changed, but also look at what has changed in your ecosystem. In the second example I showed, I think it was crucial that the suppliers across the world, which were around, I think, 400, also bought into that ambition and to collaborate. So to bring them in every step of your change program is essential.
Yeah. So you talked a lot about diversity when it comes to age, right? Because a new generation...
Not just age, anything. It could be skill, it could be experience, it could be culture. If you talk a global program, you might have very diverse realities with the customers in the US and in Japan. So not just by age. In digital, the age component, it's actually not true that digital natives are only younger. There's some 50s generation up that are pretty savvy in technology. So it's also a bit of a preference and personality. How curious are you into diving into technology? But you need these different types of characters in designing your change program.
And what if you bring some new generations in your company, right? To help you to drive change.
Yeah.
Do you see possible problems arising? For instance, with the generations who are, or generations, maybe the persons who have a lot of experience, and they are being told by new groups of people who have lovely ideas, perhaps, that they should change stuff, and maybe that might be hard. So do you have some advice for the people with lots of experience who definitely know what they are talking about, getting new ideas from younger people or less experienced people, how to be open to that? Because I can imagine that can be hard to do so.
I wouldn't even say that they're wrong, because they have a lot of experience and they know what worked in the past.
Yeah.
But it may be worthwhile to listen to what the younger generation or people with a different background have to say. So I don't want to reduce it just on the age, because I see, for example, a lot of organizations that are non-tech companies or non-data companies. When you, especially, for example, automotive companies, you bring in tech and data people, that's not necessarily the characteristic of that organization. They're engineers at heart. So there's a culture conflict between these two groups.
Yeah.
Just like you're talking about younger generation, older generation. So it's really about having that open mindset, this growth mindset, to wanting to understand, listen. I think that's the big word. Empathy is the big word here, to try to understand the other positions and then make something out of it. And I think the combination of it is going to make it better, because some of the new ideas, they may not be realistic and they need some tweaking. They might be valuable, though, to the question is, why have you done this always like this? This could be a better way, is a really good and valid question, because it makes you look at what you've done in the last 10 years, maybe in a similar way, in a different way. And maybe helps you understand, oh, that could be a better way.
Oh, I love that. The growth mindset, people. I think we addressed it yesterday as well. It's one of the 21st century skills, right? Having a growth mindset, being open to ideas, empathy, as you mentioned. Great. So we're on to a last question. I feel like we could talk for hours, but we have to speed it up. So sorry. So our last question is from Slav Vasilevsky, and the question is, how can actually, I think we addressed that already. How can generational diversity help digital transformation? I think we covered that, right?
Yeah, I think it's crucial. So that's the idea about the swarming, to bring in different ideas and different schools of thought to make the solution better.
So Slav, I'm so sorry, but we're going to skip that one. So we're going back to Professor Dr. Karsten Mackholtz for his second question. Thank you so much. How about integrating your customers in the prototyping process?
100%.
Yeah, 100%?
100% should do that, especially when you look at a lot of the digital transformation that's happening in the customer area. If you don't do that, you might design something really nice, which is not actually meeting the need of the customer. My favorite example is always some of the car companies. The engineers are so in love with their product that they sometimes design things that are not really needed by the customer, nor even wanted. And so you might find out really late when the car is already in production, which is, 5 to 7 years, actually 7 years production cycle or engineering cycle. So 100%.
Oh. Great answer to a great question. Thank you so much, dear viewers, for sending all your questions in. Keep them coming for our next session as well. Thank you so much, Claudia, for joining us here live today at DPW.